Hello and welcome to another episode of the DigiTeacher. This week I'd like to tackle an issue which I've been putting off tackling for quite a while, and that is the use of large language models in education. A few months ago we did a panel discussion on this topic, and the general feeling was quite optimistic. The different uses that could be put to large language models, and there were lots of things to be excited about. I don't want to be a curmudgeon, but I think we also need to look at some of the downsides, and I'm going to be wearing my English teacher hat here. So those who follow the channel will know that I teach IT, and I talk a lot about teaching programming, teaching coding and robotics, that kind of thing. But I'm also an English teacher by training, and in my English classes I'm finding it quite hard to deal with ChatGPT, and for the rest of this podcast I'm going to call it large language models. I'm going to just use the generic term ChatGPT. So here's an example. I set a task in which students had to take the themes of the play they were studying, Merchant of Venice in this case, and they had to do a piece of transactional writing. So they had to create a magazine article. They could do it handwritten or they could do a digital copy. And they had to produce a kind of sensationalist magazine which displayed their knowledge of the themes of the play and obviously striking the correct register. So what did I find from their responses? In terms of being able to articulate insights into the play, there was a full range, a full spectrum between those who could narrate the events of the play, and that was about it. Even there are some who made some factual errors, to those who showed real insight. For example, an understanding of the theme of the dutiful daughter versus the rebellious daughter, what it meant in their own lives, what it meant in society. Now, where did they get these understandings from? Quite clearly, from a reading of the play, from their own lives, from discussion in class, and from sites like SparkNotes. So we all know that SparkNotes exists. When I was at university, we certainly used, the case study notes and things like that, and I don't see anything wrong with that. This is not what this is about. It's not about taking second-party understandings and sources and using them in your essay without adequately citing them. We weren't testing citation. No doubt sites like SparkNotes were used. If this were an academic essay, if they were writing a literary essay, we would expect them to cite their sources. But this was putting it into your own words in terms of a sensationalist magazine article. So a lot of any kind of plagiarism was kind of masked by the assignment itself. But I think that's perfectly natural, perfectly normal, and I'm kind of unconcerned about that. At grade 8 level, they would only be beginning to learn how to cite sources anyway. It's more important that they're able to get those insights first, and then we'll teach them how to cite it properly to avoid plagiarism. In terms of the writing task, so using transactional writing, so obviously making it into transactional writing task does do away with the ability of students to go undetected in using cut and paste. Because you're putting it into a different register, it's quite clear where they have borrowed from sources. And there was some of that. Some of that was visible. You could see that they had just cut and paste from SparkNotes or something, wherever they'd got it from, and plopped it into the magazine article without a thought for altering, editing the register. But I'm not really, this is more about ChatGPT than about cut and paste and plagiarism. In terms of the transactional writing, of course, you also got a full range of responses from those who were able to express this in the correct tone, the correct register for a magazine article, were able actually to do that quite nicely. Some students are able to do that quite naturally. You barely have to teach them that. The other group of students who, while putting it in their own words, weren't quite successful in capturing the tone of a magazine article. And you could see they tried, but they weren't as successful as others. So that full range, perfectly natural, perfectly normal. So where my concern comes in really is when it comes down to use of large language models. Because I could take some Spark Notes and I could plop it in into ChatGPT, and I could say to it, make this into a sensationalist magazine article, and it would spit out a result. And clearly a minority of students, but you could kind of detect that this was a distinct possibility. Either because the language and grammar itself was too perfect. You would expect grade 8 students to be making spelling mistakes, grammar mistakes, even when they're putting it in Word and are able to spell check. Students don't always self-correct using the Word properly. So you would expect to kind of find perfect grammar and spelling out of ChatGPT, but a kind of very generic feel, no real insights, nothing that allows you to see the student that you know in class, and their own idiosyncrasies and their own ways of expressing things. And there was a minority of students that had quite clearly used ChatGPT and hadn't edited the results. So, to take this experience of a task and what to do about it in your classroom. And I think one of the things one has to do is you have to recognize that ChatGPT and engines like it are there, and teach students to use it successfully to create better writing. One doesn't want to have that tool available and students are using it anyway, and we are not helping them to use that tool to improve their own writing, their own expression. So one way of thinking about it is that at any one time in your classroom, the use of large language models is in a particular state. So when is it allowed to be used for what purposes? So using the analogy of a traffic light, if the state is red, then ChatGPT would not be allowed at all. You're supposed to be using other tools, other approaches. If it's amber, then ChatGPT is being used, but it's being used for tasks that are directed by the teacher. Students can't use it for, off their own bat. When it turns to green, however, ChatGPT can be used freely by students, but the purpose is to generate ideas. Students are not allowed to hand in text that has been generated by ChatGPT. When it turns kind of back to amber again, which is a state of blue, yes, it can be used freely by students, so off their own initiative and for their own purposes, and they are allowed to hand in text that is submitted generated by ChatGPT, but they do need to edit that text before submitting it. I can't imagine that one would ever have a state where ChatGPT can be freely used by students and just handed in as is without editing. So I've excluded that from this particular tool. I think setting things out in this way offers us insights into how we direct tasks, and it gives us a classroom management tool. So if you have this, for example, up in your room, then you can indicate quite clearly which state it is in. What I use is a little arrow with press stick, and I just move the arrow to indicate what state the classroom is in. So most of the time it's not using ChatGPT. I would only be using it for specific assignments, and that would happen during particular lessons, not many lessons. Most of the time, especially in an English classroom, I'm expecting students to be working on their own writing and generating ideas directly from the text that they are studying. So to just unpack that a little bit, what sort of tasks might an English teacher find useful? Well, in terms of writing, you could, for example, take ChatGPT and say, write a 300-word whatever about this particular topic, and it generates the topic. And you might say, put it in a particular register. And then you might have the student take that and then edit it and revise it and put it in a different register. So that would focus very much on changing, the diction, changing the register of the writing. It's now for a different purpose. But you've got ChatGPT to do the donkey work on a piece of writing, and now you're kind of editing it. And I think that kind of exercise could be quite useful. It might be useful in generating, kind of knowledge about, if you're looking at the concerns of a piece of literature. So what are the themes and so on. You could get ChatGPT to write that, and then you could unpack that. You could critique that. So students might be asked, well, has ChatGPT hallucinated? Has it made stuff up? Did everything that it's written about, was that actually in the piece of writing? Because ChatGPT gets that wrong quite often. And are these genuine themes and concerns of the play, or the poem, or the novel, or what have you? So I think that kind of exercise is quite useful, both in terms of teaching students to use large language models, and in terms of the outcomes, in terms of writing ability or literary analysis. So I think that there are plenty of exercises where you can get ChatGPT to generate stuff, to generate text, and then get students to edit it. In terms of language, correcting language mistakes, well, ChatGPT is quite good at not making many language mistakes, so that might be very limited in terms of applicability. In terms of maybe producing comprehension passages and things like that to use in your class, well, that's a teacher use of it. And I did one of these, and then I set the last question was, I got ChatGPT to generate, how does this change your view of the passage? So that was quite an interesting question to see how students responded to knowing that something had been generated by ChatGPT. One big issue, I think, in teaching at the moment, I think it's always an issue, but I think it's particularly true at the moment, is that there is a huge gulf between the kinds of idioms that are used by the generation of most teachers and many of the texts generated, because writers tend to be older, and the idioms available to students. So because idiomatic expression has undergone quite a lot of change, students often just don't understand passages because they don't understand the idioms. And perhaps getting ChatGPT to generate it and put it into different idioms might be an idea. It might be a useful tool for that, or just to become aware of different idiomatic usage, and to use it as a tool for unpacking and understanding different idiomatic usages. So I think there are ideas that could be very applicable in an English classroom, and I'd be very interested to know what your feelings are. Have you tried any of these things? What your experience is, interesting assignments or tasks using ChatGPT or similar AI models, and what have you found with them? So if you have experiences, please leave it in a comment. If you've liked this video, please like and share. Click the notification bell so that you never miss another episode again.